A question of trust.
Summary.
Horace Danby, a 50-year-old locksmith, appeared to be a respectable and honest man, but he had a secret life as a burglar. He had a passion for rare and expensive books, which he could not afford with his legitimate earnings. To finance his love for books, he committed one well-planned burglary every year, stealing from the rich but never harming anyone. One summer afternoon, Horace targeted Shotover Grange, a large house with a safe containing jewels worth £15,000. He had carefully studied the house and disabled the burglar alarm. However, while he was about to break into the safe, his hay fever acted up due to the flowers in the room, causing him to sneeze. At that moment, a young woman dressed in red appeared and pretended to be the lady of the house. She spoke to him calmly and confidently, claiming that she needed the jewels for a party but had forgotten the safe's combination. She promised to let him go if he opened the safe for her. Trusting her, Horace opened the safe without gloves and handed over the jewels. Days later, Horace was arrested because his fingerprints were found on the safe. He realized that the woman was a professional thief who had tricked him into stealing the jewels for her. Horace was sentenced to prison, where he resented the idea of honor among thieves, as he had been deceived by someone from his own world of crime. The story highlights the theme of deception and irony. A thief himself becomes the victim of a more cunning thief. It also conveys the idea that crime never pays, as even the most careful criminals eventually get caught.
Question, answers. Horace stated that he robbed only those who had a lot of money. Can he be justified? Horace Danby justified his thefts by claiming that he only stole from the wealthy, but stealing, in any form, is ethically and legally wrong. His intention was to use the stolen money to buy rare and expensive books, which does not excuse his actions. A person must work hard to fulfill their desires instead of resorting to dishonesty. While Horace was seen as a respectable citizen, his actions contradicted moral values such as honesty, sincerity, and integrity. Therefore, his justification is flawed, and his actions cannot be excused.
Give a pen picture of Horace Danby. Horace Danby was a 50-year-old, unmarried man who lived with his housekeeper. He was a skilled locksmith and a respected member of society, yet he had a hidden criminal side. Every year, he meticulously planned and executed a single burglary to finance his passion for rare and expensive books. He was careful, methodical, and never harmed anyone. However, despite his intelligence, he was outwitted by a cunning lady, leading to his arrest. His experience in prison left him bitter, making him detest the phrase honor among thieves.
What made Horace Danby commit a theft at Shotover Grange? Horace Danby carefully selected Shotover Grange because it had a safe containing jewels worth £15,000, which would provide him with enough money to buy books for the next 12 months. His decision was influenced by a magazine article that provided a detailed description of the house, including a floor plan and images of the rooms. This made it easier for him to plan the burglary with precision. His love for rare books was his only motivation for theft, as he did not steal for wealth or luxury.
Describe Horace Danby's encounter with the lady. Horace Danby was about to break open the safe at Shotover Grange when he encountered a mysterious young woman dressed in red. She approached him in a friendly manner and pretended to be the lady of the house. She claimed that she had come to take her jewels but had forgotten the combination to the safe. Using her charm and clever deception, she convinced Horace to open the safe for her, promising to let him go. Trusting her, he opened the safe without wearing gloves, handing over the jewels. Later, when the police arrested him, he realized that he had been tricked by a professional thief.
Horace Danby was a meticulous planner, but he still faltered. Why? Horace Danby always planned his burglaries carefully, studying every detail about the houses he targeted. However, he made a critical mistake at Shotover Grange. He had gathered information about the house, its layout, security system, and servants, but he failed to verify the residents. This lack of knowledge led him to trust the lady in red, who turned out to be a clever thief. Moreover, his hay fever made him vulnerable, and he lost his presence of mind when faced with an unexpected situation. His overconfidence and lack of caution ultimately led to his downfall.
Let me go, and I promise never to do this kind of thing again. I really mean it. Did he really mean it? Horace Danby pleaded with the woman, promising to give up stealing if she let him go. However, his words were merely an act of desperation, as he wanted to escape the situation. His promise was not genuine because just 3 days after the incident, he began planning his next burglary. Unfortunately, before he could act on his plans, he was arrested and sent to prison. His quick return to crime shows that he never truly intended to change his ways.
Why did Horace Danby get angry when anyone talked about honor among thieves? Horace Danby had always believed in a certain code of conduct among thieves, stealing only from the rich and never harming anyone. However, his experience with the lady in red shattered this belief. He realized that she was a far more cunning and professional thief than he was. She manipulated him, took the jewels, and left him to take the blame. This betrayal deeply frustrated him, making him despise the phrase honor among thieves. He understood that in the world of crime, there was no trust, only deception.
Have you studied? Answer these.
Horace claimed that he only robbed wealthy people. Can his actions be justified? Horace Danby was not a typical criminal. He was a locksmith who stole once a year to buy expensive books. He justified his actions by believing that he only stole from the rich and never harmed anyone. However, theft, regardless of the motive, is still a crime. Instead of stealing, Horace should have worked hard to fulfill his desires. His actions cannot be justified, as honesty and sincerity are more valuable than any material possession.
Describe the character of Horace Danby. What kind of person was he? Horace Danby appeared to be a respectable and well-mannered man. He was about 50 years old, unmarried, and lived with a housekeeper. He was a skilled locksmith and a careful planner who committed a burglary once a year to buy rare books. Though he was not violent, he was still a thief. His overconfidence led to his downfall when he was tricked by a woman who pretended to be the owner of the house. His arrest made him bitter, especially when people spoke about honor among thieves.
Why did Horace Danby decide to commit a robbery at Shotover Grange? Horace planned the burglary at Shotover Grange because he had learned that the house had a safe containing jewels worth £15,000. He only stole once a year and needed a large sum to sustain himself and his love for books. Additionally, a magazine had published an article about the house, including a detailed layout and description of the rooms, making it easier for him to plan the theft.
Explain Horace Danby's encounter with the lady in red. How did she deceive him? As Horace was about to open the safe at Shotover Grange, he was startled by a young woman in red, who claimed to be the owner's wife. She spoke to him politely and confidently, saying she had come to take her jewels for a party but had forgotten the safe's combination. She promised to let him go if he helped her open it. Trusting her, Horace unlocked the safe without wearing gloves and gave her the jewels. However, she was actually a professional thief who had tricked him into committing the crime. Later, when Horace was arrested, he realized he had been deceived.
Horace Danby was a careful planner, yet he made a crucial mistake. Why did he fail? Horace meticulously studied Shotover Grange, its security system, and the movements of the servants. However, he did not verify the identities of the house's residents. When the woman in red appeared, he was completely unprepared for this unexpected situation. Instead of questioning her claims, he blindly trusted her. Additionally, his overconfidence and carelessness led him to open the safe without gloves, leaving behind fingerprints, which eventually got him arrested.
Let me go, and I promise never to steal again. Do you think Horace was sincere about this promise? Horace made this promise in a desperate attempt to escape, but he did not truly mean it. He was only trying to convince the woman to let him go. His promise of giving up robbery lasted only for 3 days, after which he started looking for another safe to rob. However, before he could execute another crime, he was arrested because of his fingerprints left at Shotover Grange.
Why did Horace Danby feel frustrated when people spoke about honor among thieves? Horace believed in a code of conduct among thieves, but his experience proved otherwise. He was deceived by a more cunning thief, a woman who tricked him into stealing for her. When he was arrested, he realized that there was no loyalty or trust among criminals. This betrayal made him resentful whenever someone mentioned honor among thieves, as he had learned the hard way that thieves only look out for themselves.
Mijbil the Otter. Gavin Maxwell. Summary.
The story follows the author, Gavin Maxwell, who, after losing his pet dog, longs for a new companion. While traveling to Basra with a friend, he expresses his desire to domesticate an otter. His friend suggests getting one from the marshes along the Tigris River in Iraq. Upon reaching their destination, only the friend's mail arrives. A few days later, the friend departs while the author stays back, waiting for his own mail. When it finally arrives, he returns to his room to find an otter, delivered in a sack by two Arabs, along with a note stating it was a gift from his friend. He names the otter Mijbil, or Mij for short. At first, Mij is shy and hesitant, but he gradually adapts to his new surroundings. He is covered in mud, and it takes almost a month of cleaning to reveal his actual color. Mij has a deep fascination with water, even learning to turn on the tap by himself. He plays endlessly, splashing and squishing every drop until the bowl is empty. Life in Basra goes smoothly until it is time to return to London. Since British Airlines do not allow animals, the author books a flight on another airline that permits Mij to travel in a box. An hour before the flight, he places Mij in the box to get him accustomed to it and steps out for a quick meal. On returning, he finds Mij has torn apart the boxes in a lining, injuring himself in the process. With only 10 minutes left before takeoff, the author quickly cleans the mess and rushes to the airport in a cab, barely making it in time. He explains the situation to a kind and understanding air hostess, who advises him to keep the box on his lap. However, as soon as he opens it, Mij leaps out, causing chaos in the plane. Frightened passengers react in panic, a lady even climbs onto her seat. In the commotion, the author gets covered in curry. Fortunately, the air hostess helps retrieve Mij, and they finally reach London. Mij proves to be an entertaining and playful companion. He enjoys playing with ping-pong balls, marbles, and even a damaged suitcase, which he turns into his own little game. During their walks in London, Mij attracts curiosity, as people are unfamiliar with otters. Many guess wildly about what he is. Some think he is a baby seal, a squirrel, or even a hippo. The most amusing reaction comes from a laborer digging a hole, who bewilderedly asks the author, "What is that supposed to be?"
Questions and answers.
What experiment did Maxwell think Camasfina would be suitable for? Maxwell, the narrator, visited southern Iraq in 1956. He wanted to keep an otter as a pet instead of a dog. Since Camasfina was surrounded by water, he believed it would be the perfect place to conduct this experiment.
Why does he go to Basra? How long does he wait there and why? Maxwell went to Basra to collect and respond to his mail from Europe. He had to wait for 5 days, because his mail had not yet arrived.
How does he get the otter? Does he like it? Pick out the words that tell you this. Maxwell's friend bought the otter for him and had it delivered to his place of stay. He liked the otter, as evident from the lines. The second night, Mijbil came onto my bed in the small hours and remained asleep in the crook of my knees. I made a body belt for him. These lines show his fondness for Mij and how he cared for him.
How does he get the otter? Does he like it? Pick out the words that tell you this. Maxwell's friend bought the otter for him and had it delivered to his place of stay. He liked the otter, as evident from the lines. The second night, Mijbil came onto my bed in the small hours and remained asleep in the crook of my knees. I made a body belt for him. These lines show his fondness for Mij and how he cared for him.
Why was the otter named Maxwell's otter? Zoologists named the otter species Lutrogale perspicillata maxwelli, as it was a previously unknown species. Since Maxwell introduced this species to the world, it came to be known as Maxwell's otter.
Choose the right answer. In the beginning, the otter was A. Aloof and indifferent. 2. Friendly. 3. Hostile. Aloof and indifferent.
What happened when Maxwell took Mijbil to the bathroom? What did Mij do 2 days later? When Maxwell first took Mijbil to the bathroom, the otter became ecstatic in the water. He plunged, rolled, jumped, and splashed joyfully in the bathtub. 2 days later, Mijbil disappeared and was later found playing in the bathroom. He had even learned to turn on the tap by himself.
What game had Mij invented? Mij invented a unique game using one of Maxwell's damaged suitcases. The suitcase had a sloped top, so Mij would place a ball on the higher end and run to catch it as it rolled down.
What group of animals do otters belong to? Otters belong to the Mustelidae family, which includes animals like badgers, mongooses, weasels, stoats, and minks.
What guesses did the Londoners make about Mij? Since otters are not common in England, Londoners made wild guesses about Mij's identity. Some thought he was a baby seal, a squirrel, a hippo, or even a brontosaurus.
What did Mij do to the box? The box was lined with metal, making Mij uncomfortable. In an attempt to escape, he tore through the metal lining and injured himself, causing blood to drip from the ventilation holes.
How was Mijbil transported to England? Since British Airways did not allow animals, Maxwell booked a flight on another airline that permitted pets under strict conditions. Mijbil had to be kept in a box while traveling from Iraq to Paris and then to London.
Why did Maxwell put the otter back in the box? How do you think he felt when he did this? Maxwell had no other choice but to put Mij back in the box to transport him to London. He likely felt guilty and concerned for Mij's well-being, as the otter had already injured himself trying to escape.
Why does Maxwell say the air hostess was the very queen of her kind? The air hostess showed kindness and understanding towards Maxwell's situation. She allowed him to keep Mij on his lap rather than in the box, making the journey easier. Maxwell deeply appreciated her generosity, which is why he called her the very queen of her kind.
What happened when the box was opened? As soon as the box was opened, Mijbil leaped out and created chaos on the plane. The frightened passengers panicked, with one lady even climbing onto her seat. Maxwell struggled to control Mij and, in the process, ended up covered in curry. Eventually, with the air hostess's help, Mij was caught and returned to him.
The Sermon at Benares. Summary.
The Sermon at Benares is a chapter that delves into the transformative journey of Prince Siddhartha Gautama into Lord Buddha and his teachings on the impermanence of life. Born into royalty in northern India, Siddhartha was shielded from the world's sufferings. However, upon encountering an aged man, a sick person, a funeral procession, and a monk seeking alms, he became deeply aware of life's inherent sufferings. This realization prompted him to renounce his princely life in search of enlightenment. After years of wandering and meditation, Siddhartha attained enlightenment under a peepal tree, thereafter known as the Bodhi tree. Following this profound experience, he became known as Buddha, meaning the enlightened one. He delivered his first sermon in Benares, now Varanasi, a sacred city on the Ganges River. In this sermon, Buddha recounted the story of Kisa Gotami, a grieving mother devastated by the death of her only son. In her despair, she sought a medicine to revive him. A compassionate man directed her to Buddha, who offered a solution. If she could procure a handful of mustard seeds from a household that had never experienced death, her son would be revived. Hopeful, Kisa Gotami went from house to house, only to discover that every family had faced the loss of a loved one. This journey led her to the profound realization that death is a universal and inevitable part of life. Through this parable, Buddha imparted the lesson that attachment to mortal things leads to sorrow. He emphasized that understanding the impermanence of life and accepting the inevitability of death can alleviate suffering. Grieving over the inevitable only prolongs pain. Instead, one should seek peace by embracing the transient nature of existence. This teaching underscores the importance of detachment and the acceptance of life's fleeting nature as pathways to inner peace and liberation from suffering.
How does Kisa Gotami compare human life to an inanimate object, and why? Kisa Gotami compares human life to the flickering lights of a city, which shine briefly before being extinguished, leaving darkness behind. Similarly, human life is transient. People are born, live for a short time, and eventually pass away. She makes this comparison because she is deeply grieving the loss of her son and realizes that sorrow spreads like darkness when a life is lost.
Where and when did Siddhartha attain enlightenment and become the Buddha? Siddhartha Gautama was deeply moved after witnessing a sick man, an old man, a funeral procession, and a monk. At the age of 25, he renounced his royal life and spent 7 years seeking enlightenment. Eventually, he meditated under a peepal tree until he attained enlightenment after 7 days. This tree later became known as the Bodhi tree, or the tree of wisdom.
Who are referred to as wise in the Buddha's sermons? According to the Buddha, wise people are those who understand that death is inevitable. They do not grieve or lament over what is beyond human control. Unlike those who suffer in ignorance, the wise accept the natural cycle of life and death with composure and inner peace.
Why was Kisa Gotami grief-stricken? Kisa Gotami was devastated by the death of her only son. In her desperation, she carried his lifeless body from house to house, begging for medicine to bring him back to life. Eventually, a kind man directed her to the Buddha, who helped her realize the universal truth of mortality.
Why was Gautama Siddhartha called the Buddha? After meditating under a peepal tree and attaining enlightenment, Siddhartha gained profound wisdom about life, suffering, and death. He began preaching his insights, guiding others towards peace and liberation from sorrow. Because of his awakened state, he came to be known as the Buddha, meaning the enlightened one or the awakened one.
How did the Buddha teach Kisa Gotami the truth about life and death? The Buddha asked Kisa Gotami to bring him a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one had ever experienced a death. As she searched, she realized that every household had lost a loved one at some point. This experience helped her understand that death is a universal truth, and she gradually accepted her son's passing. Describe Gautama Buddha's early life before enlightenment. Before becoming the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama was a prince who lived in luxury, shielded from the harsh realities of the world. However, upon witnessing suffering for the first time, he was deeply disturbed. Seeking a way to overcome human suffering, he renounced his princely life and embarked on a spiritual quest. After 7 years of wandering, he attained enlightenment. To seek peace, one must remove the arrow of lamentation. What values does this statement reflect? The statement conveys 2 important values. Acceptance. Grieving excessively over loss does not change reality. Instead, one must accept the natural cycle of life. Emotional resilience. Lamenting over the inevitable only brings suffering. True peace comes from overcoming sorrow and embracing wisdom.
What sights moved Siddhartha Gautama to seek enlightenment? While on a hunting trip, Siddhartha encountered 4 sights that deeply affected him: a sick man, an old man, a funeral procession, and a monk begging for alms. These sights revealed to him the unavoidable nature of suffering, inspiring him to renounce his royal life and seek enlightenment.
What did the Buddha preach about death? The Buddha taught that death is an inescapable reality for all living beings. No amount of weeping or grieving can bring back the dead. Wise individuals accept this truth and focus on overcoming sorrow rather than being consumed by it.
How do grief and mourning affect a person? Excessive grief only prolongs suffering and damages one's well-being. It weakens the body, causes emotional distress, and makes life miserable. According to the Buddha, true peace can only be achieved by accepting the reality of life and death.
What lesson did Kisa Gotami learn in the end? After failing to find a house untouched by death, Kisa Gotami realized that suffering is universal. She understood that she had been selfish in her grief, thinking her loss was unique. She finally accepted the reality of death.
How was Kisa Gotami both selfish and grief-stricken? Overcome with sorrow, Kisa Gotami was unable to see beyond her own pain. She desperately searched for a cure to revive her dead son, disregarding the fact that death is a universal experience. Her grief blinded her to the suffering of others, making her momentarily selfish.
Who was Gautama Buddha? Gautama Buddha was born as Prince Siddhartha Gautama in northern India. He later renounced his royal life, attained enlightenment, and became a spiritual teacher, guiding people toward liberation from suffering.
A Question of Trust. A Question of Trust by Victor Canning is a humorous short story about a thief named Horace Danby, who believes in his own principles, but eventually gets deceived in an unexpected way. Horace Danby, a respectable thief. Horace Danby appears to be a respectable man in society, running a successful business of making locks. However, he is also a skilled thief who commits one robbery each year to finance his love for rare books. Despite his criminal activities, he considers himself an honest man, believing that he only steals from the rich. The house robbery. One summer afternoon, Horace breaks into a wealthy woman's house when the owners are away. Just as he is about to open the safe, a young woman appears, claiming to be the owner's wife. She catches him in the act, but cleverly manipulates him. She tells him that she has forgotten the safe's combination and asks for his help in opening it. Believing her story, Horace opens the safe for her. The unexpected twist. Horace leaves the house without taking anything, thinking he has helped the lady. However, a few days later, the police arrest him because his fingerprints are found at the crime scene. He realizes that the woman was not the owner but another thief who tricked him. His trust in her led to his downfall. The story highlights the irony of trust among thieves. Horace Danby, who prided himself on being careful, becomes a victim of deception. The ending teaches a lesson that crime does not pay, and even the cleverest thieves can be outsmarted.
Mijbil the Otter. Mijbil the Otter is an excerpt from The Ring of Bright Water by Gavin Maxwell. It narrates the author's experience of adopting an otter and the challenges and joys of raising it. Bringing Mijbil home. The story begins with the author deciding to keep an otter as a pet after losing his pet dog. He gets an otter from Tigris marshes in Iraq and names it Mijbil. Initially, Mijbil is shy and avoids human interaction, but soon he adapts to his new environment. Mijbil's playful nature. As days pass, Mijbil becomes playful and curious. He enjoys splashing in water and creating mischief. The author observes Mijbil's intelligence and affection, making their bond stronger. The journey to London. When the author has to return to London, he faces difficulties as airlines do not allow animals in the cabin. So, Mijbil is transported in a box. Unfortunately, during the flight, Mijbil escapes, causing panic among passengers. However, his playful antics make people laugh instead of scaring them. Life in London. In London, Mijbil becomes famous as he attracts attention with his unique appearance and playful behavior. People mistake him for a squirrel or even a small seal. Despite the challenges, Mijbil adapts well to his new life. The story highlights the deep bond between humans and animals. It also portrays otters as intelligent and friendly creatures, showing how love and patience can help in understanding and coexisting with nature.
The Sermon at Benares. The Sermon at Benares is an excerpt from the life of Gautama Buddha, originally named Siddhartha Gautama. Born in a royal family, he led a luxurious life until he encountered human suffering. Determined to find the truth of life, he renounced his princely comforts and meditated deeply, eventually attaining enlightenment and becoming the Buddha. The story of Kisa Gotami. Buddha's first sermon at Benares, now Varanasi, is considered a significant turning point in his spiritual journey. In this story, a woman named Kisa Gotami suffers immense grief after losing her only son. Unable to accept his death, She desperately seeks a way to bring him back to life. People advise her to meet Buddha, who tells her that he can revive her son if she brings a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one has ever lost a loved one. The realization of truth. Kisa Gotami goes from house to house but finds that every family has experienced death in some form. This makes her realize that death is a universal truth and inevitable. She returns to Buddha, who teaches her that human life is transient, just like ripe fruits that eventually fall or an extinguished lamp. He explains that wisdom comes from accepting the impermanence of life and freeing oneself from sorrow. The sermon teaches that attachment leads to suffering, and wisdom lies in understanding the impermanence of life. Only by overcoming grief can one attain peace and enlightenment.